Hello everyone, Pulse here to bring you yet another info-packed episode of Delving Deep ESO. Now in today's episode we're going to continue our discussion about the skill lines that will be available in Elder Scrolls Online, and in this episode in particular focusing on the Daggerfall Covenant and the racial skills involved, which includes the Bretons, Orcs, and the Redguards. Now before we get into the information, let me give a shout out to a Mr. Zalbarius for pointing me in the right direction for finding out info on the racial skill line, so big thanks to him for pointing me in the right direction. Now before we get into the actual info, as always, let me remind everyone that this isn't confirmed information from Zenimax, and instead this is a collective of information that comes from numerous beta testers, and the evidence is really piling up at this point to really give us a real clear picture of what we're going to be getting. So all of this information, maybe it's not confirmed, but honestly guys, this is what we're more than likely going to get in some form or another. Now beyond this guys, I also have to mention that plain whole numbers, I will try to keep them off the table when talking, but it's very hard to do so, especially in these racial skill lines I've noticed, and you just have to remind yourself that this stuff will change and we don't know the context of the numbers, so take everything said with a huge pile of salt. Now in addition to the numbers thing, percentages will be mentioned throughout, mainly because they give us a little bit of a better picture. They give us some more context as to the skill and how it might be used. So I will be mentioning both of those throughout, but make sure to take the plain numbers specifically with a huge pile of salts, as always. But let's get into the actual skills, shall we? We're going to start with the Bretons of Daggerfall. Now the Bretons have the ultimate skill called Dragon Skin. This is going to have a damage shielded is absorbed as magicka during this period, and the way it's worded seems to me that essentially you're going to pop up this bubble of sorts, which is going to essentially make you invincible to health damage, but your magicka bar will take hits as well. This is kind of similar to skills in previous MMOs. The most easily recognizable to this same effect is Arcane Shield, I believe it's called, or Arcane Barrier maybe, in WoW, which was a mage skill. You would pop this and it would just suck up a couple hits for you, and your magic or your magicka or mana would take a hit instead. So this is a pretty cool skill. It's not like anything we've seen previously as far as I can remember, but yeah, let's get into the passive, shall we, and then we'll talk about the whole package that is a Breton. The first one we have is called Light Armor Affinity. This is going to increase the EXP gain with your Light Armor skill line by 15%. This has been a theme throughout the different racial skill lines. It looks like Bretons have been given the Light Armor skill line. I would have preferred a weapon, to be completely honest, but I suppose Light Armor fits them just well. Then we have Gift of Magnus, which I know the name has been used and the skill has been used with the High Elves of the Aldmeri Dominion. So I do think that there's some filler passive stuff going on right now, so do make sure to take that into consideration as well. But Gift of Magnus is going to increase maximum magicka by 10%. Then we have Spell Resistance. This is going to increase spell resistance by a flat 50. Magicka Mastery, reduce the cost of spells by 3%. Now it's a little bit magic heavy, as I guess some people would be expecting that. I really wasn't. I was expecting more of a more balanced thing, because as far as I know, and I could be wrong as I keep mentioning with the lore, I'm not like totally up to date or anything like that, but the Bretons have always appeared to me to be this more versatile race that kind of fit in between, and you could have Bretons that fully focused on magic, or some that fully focused on the melee and ignored their elvish bloodline kind of thing, or you could have the people that stuck in between. So I was expecting a more balanced sort of thing, but I guess this could be something that harkens back to previous test games. Again, I don't know. I haven't played them in ages, so maybe these are skills that are related to what the previous test games brought to the table. Now as for the skills themselves, they could be quite strong actually for anyone using magicka based skills for damage or healing or what have you. Now I want to mention again that the Gift of Magnus thing, it seems to be a stand-in for something else, since it's also present with the High Elves, but I would still expect a magicka or magicka regen based skill in its place anyway, so I suppose in the end their sort of skill set as a race is more than likely going to stay the same. We'll probably just get a different name with Gift of Magnus, or maybe a slightly tweaked skill. We'll have to see going forward. Now spell resistance is pretty blah. As you guys have probably caught on by now, I'm not a fan of these base number resistance or armor or what have you bonuses. I'm just not a fan of these, but it can't be passed up, it can't be forgotten that unlike the specific elemental types that we've seen thus far in the other races, this is obviously more versatile and may actually contribute to actual play because it's spell resistance as a whole and not just a very specific elemental type. So in the end, this could actually be something useful. It's still not something I like. It's not something I would like to see on the races. I really would have expected them to just drop it entirely and give us something more interesting. But in the end, I would have to pick a spell-based resistance over an elemental one any day of the week. It's not even a hard choice. It's pick the spell resistance. It's going to be more versatile, more useful throughout. So of the resistances, this one is obviously the best in my book, but hopefully they change it. Maybe they'll change their mind and these are just stick-ins from old build or something. But that's me being hopeful, to be honest. Now finally, let's talk about the ultimate, shall we? That ultimate is pretty cool and pretty unique from what I can remember, and from the sounds of things, it's going to work like a bubble, which is going to exchange magicka to consume hits, which would normally hit your health, and that could be potentially amazing in the right hands. I fully expect some players to get a hold of this and see some videos or comment threads on Reddit or whatever, where people have pulled off some ridiculous shenanigans with dragon skin, bubbling their health to pull off some crazy wins. I mean, you see this in WoW and other MMOs quite a lot, where people deliberately make their character in a very weird way that maybe doesn't work all the time, but then they just tackle this end-game boss that normally requires a full group of people or something, and they just soloed it without issue because they pulled off some weird-ass build with an ability like dragon skin where they could absorb damage or something like that with their ultimate. I don't know. I fully expect shenanigans. That's really all there is to it. But overall, I think the Bretons are pretty cool. In fact, I will probably play one. But that's mostly because I like the Bretons. I like their lore. I like their elvish bloodline and all of that stuff. So, as I said in previous videos, I'm sure I have, and if I haven't, I should slap myself. Pick the race that you like. And I'm looking at Bretons currently. It's probably what I'm going to be playing. But let's get into the Orcs, or the Orsimer as they're called in the Elvish language. Their ultimate is called Berserker Rage. This is going to increase damage by a whopping 20% and then also reduce damage taken by 10% for 15 seconds. This is pretty strong, I have to say, and it's a little bit weird because when you see Berserker Rage, it's almost always coupled with do more damage, take more damage. This is like, nope, I'm an orc, I don't give a damn. You can't hurt me, I'm going to crush your face. That's pretty much the feeling I get from Berserker Rage. It seems pretty damn strong. Let's get into the passives though, and then we'll talk about the Orcs as a whole at the end there. They have the Heavy Armor Expertise passive, which is going to increase EXP gain on heavy armor skill lines by 15% as you would expect. They have Brawny, which is going to increase maximum health and stamina by 5%. We have Robust, which I know the name was used, but unlike the Gift of Magnus, the skill is actually different. This is going to increase health regeneration in combat by 7%. And then we finally have Swift, which is going to reduce the cost of sprinting by 10%. Now, unlike the Bretons, this is what I would have expected from the Orcs. This is pretty brutish in nature, with the potential to simply lose their minds and go batshit crazy with the Berserker Rage and move quickly all over the place with reduced sprint costs and dominating the battlefield in heavy armor and the world's most amazingly crafted weaponry. That really seems orcish when I think about an orc, and it sounds pretty damn cool if you ask me. I think it fits them well, and they're not too toned down or anything. They actually seem really powerful. In fact, I'd be willing to bet that they're one of the stronger races going into ESO with what we know currently. Obviously, it's going to change going forward in balance and whatnot, but so far, Orcs seem to have a really powerful combination. Especially with that health potential. It could be pretty huge, making them really tough to take down and mobile all over the place, and just you can't really underestimate the ability to have sprint more often and have all this extra health, and then the potential for a bursty damage ability. It just seems like a really powerful combination of skills. So look out for the Orcs dominating your face in PvP. But then finally we get to the Redguards, guys. These are, as far as I know, not one of the more popular races, and I could be wrong on that. They seem to be one of the more mysterious ones from what I could find out. But the Redguard have the ultimate Power Charge. Now this is going to increase the stat power by 20% for 15 seconds. Now this is potentially really strong, but I'll get to it and I'll kind of do a comparison between Berserker Rage and Power Charge at the end here. Let's go through the rest of their passive, shall we? The first passive they have is Shield Affinity, which is going to increase the XP gain with the one hand plus shield skill line. They have Vigor, which is going to increase stamina recovery in combat by 7%. They have Conditioning, which is going to increase maximum stamina by 10%. And then finally, one of the most interesting skills we've seen, in fact, I'd be willing to say it's the most interesting skill we've seen in the racial skill lines period, is Adrenaline Rush. This is going to damage an enemy with a melee attack that restores 34 stamina, and it cannot occur more than once every 3 seconds. Now, this is a passive ability, it's not an active, so to me this says it's like a proc kind of thing. So you're going to be just playing your game, and you're going to get this extra jab of damage and this extra chunk of stamina back for playing, and I suppose it's not the most engaging thing, but it's way more interesting than the resistances we see, that is for damn sure, and it's way more interesting than just a plain stamina increase or a stamina boost at the maximum, or it's way more interesting than having extra magicka. It's more interesting with all of those things. Procs are a lot more interesting in that regard, because it's a little bit uncontrollable and you don't really know what you're going to get, but you can definitely feel it, because you'll notice that that chunk of stamina coming in, and you'll notice that little chunk of damage added on as well. And it's hard to say how this will trigger, if it's like a crit based thing, if it's seemingly on random, if it's based on your kind of quote unquote auto attack, if it's like your mouse attack. So we'll have to see going forward, but that's a pretty interesting passive, I have to say. Now, I still think that Redguards overall should have been granted the dual wield EXP bonus thing rather than the Dark Elves. I really just, it seems like their thing. It really seems like their thing. So I'm surprised, but I suppose Sword and Shield fits as well, because that's their whole thing. They're weapon masters, I guess. Other than that though, goodness lord, if I could talk, Redguards look really strong. Really, for anyone that wants to use stamina as their main resource for damage output, it really seems strong. Vigor and Conditioning are pretty damn good. And then we have this really intriguing ability with Adrenaline Rush, which appears to be a proc, as I said, which is going to give you more stamina as well, and then also give you a little nice damage at the end. Maybe some of the less interesting skills are simply sit-ins, while Zenimax preps more interesting passives like this one onto other races. When I look at this, that's really what I think. I feel like Adrenaline Rush is maybe something that they've tweaked a lot, and they've gotten into a good place, and some of the repeated spells or the unknowns or the very bland skills are maybe going to get an upgrade going forward. So I feel like we'll probably see a little bit more interesting passives going forward. So even though we've been going over them, we still get good themes, we still have a good idea of what each race brings to the table, but I would also expect some nice tweaking as well. But let's get into the ultimate, shall we? Let's talk about this guy. It's ridiculous, I have to say. It's really, really strong. Now, I know I said Berserker Rage was really strong, and it is strong. It's based on the damage that you are outputting, right? It's going to give you a 20% damage bonus. That's going to be strong all the time, right? And the main difference between Berserker Rage and Power Charge is the fact that Berserker Rage is going to be good all the time, right? The thing is, with Power Charge, it's going to affect your main damage enhancing stats. So theoretically, through Power Charge as your ultimate, in high-end levels of gear, in high levels even, it's going to far outshine a skill like Berserker Rage, where the scaling affects what your ultimate does, which is not something we've seen too much of so far in the ultimate category. And plain and simple, this makes Redguard really, really strong in in-game gear. If you build yourself to do lots of physical damage, this ultimate is going to be really powerful, like way more powerful than some of the other ultimates we've seen attached to the races so far. This seems just crazy strong to me. The math part of my brain is exploding with possibilities, really. It really seems strong. And overall, I have to mention as well, I didn't really say this in the other ones, but I feel like the Bretons and the Orcs and the Redguard of the Daggerfall Covenant are sitting pretty nicely compared to the Aldmeri Dominion and Ebonheart Pact. And this really makes me think that, as far as I remember, and I'm pretty sure this is true, the Daggerfall Covenant was one of the first factions, or one of the first alliances that got extra tweaking, mainly because they needed to make them usable at like the conferences and stuff. So I'm thinking that Daggerfall Covenant has had the most time for polish, and I think that's why these skills seem a little bit more balanced. Like the whole alliance seems more balanced. You have the potential for a tank in Redguard, but lots of melee damage. You have the Orcs, which are fitting to theme with lots of heavy armor and running around beating the shit out of people. And then you have the magic user in Breton, and that sort of balance doesn't seem to be the case in the other two. So hopefully we'll see some nice tweaking going on with the Aldmeri Dominion and Evanhart pack going forward. But don't you worry, guys, as I learn more about this stuff, you guys will learn more in more episodes of Delving Deep ESO. But that's going to do it from you guys. Thanks so much for watching and joining me for this episode of Delving Deep ESO. Hopefully you enjoyed it and found somewhat informational, and if so, make sure to hit that thumbs up and that subscribe button as well, and make sure to help the channel grow, because every time you guys do that, it helps the channel grow a little bit, and thus I can put more content out on the channel more frequently, better quality, and so on and so forth. Also, make sure to leave a comment down below on anything we discussed today, or anything Elder Scrolls, anything MMO or gaming related at all, really. I do love talking to you guys, so anytime I see a comment on the videos, I always get a little bit giddy, a little bit excited to talk with you guys, because you guys are the viewers, and that's what I'm doing it for. That's the whole point of doing these discussion videos. So it's always cool to comment and discuss stuff with you guys. Thanks again for watching, guys, everyone. Wow, that was awful. As I was saying, thanks again for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.